what has become the largest study of workplace wellness in the world. It's called the Values and Attitudes Study. Now, this ongoing study allows organizations to measure their own scores with the scores of the best organizations in the world. The study measures 27 different factors, but we've learned over the years that we pay attention to 3 of them. And here's what they are. The first key indicator is something called values tension. Values tension as interpersonal tension. The gap between the way that you'd like to be treated by the people around you and the way you're actually treated by those people. What we see is that as values tension rises, productivity and quality fall. And when you think about it, this really kind of makes sense, because if people in an organization are in conflict with one another, they're really not focused on the business and on their customers. Conversely, in the best organizations that we found, where the values tension is low, their score is very low, their quality tends to be, and productivity tends to be very high. So the Values and Attitudes Study has consistently shown that the best organizations have, and listen to this stat, half of the values tension of the average organization in the world. The second key factor is something called engagement. We weren't surprised to find that most people see themselves as more engaged than their coworkers. I'm engaged, but they're not, is the way we see it. But what surprised us was the gap. In the average organization, 85% of people identify themselves as fully engaged in their work. But when you ask them about their coworkers, they say only 42% of them are engaged. Which reminds me of an old story about the fellow who's gotten a new job, and after working there a couple of weeks, he comes home, and his wife asks him, just the passing question, hey, how many people work at that new company? He says, I've been so engaged in learning my job, I really haven't had a chance to even pick up my head and find out. I'll go ask. So the next day he goes to work, and he sees a guy that he knows has been there for quite some time, and he says, hey, last night my wife was asking me about the people who work here at the company. I didn't have an answer. You've worked here a long time. So, how many people do work here? The guy gives him kind of a sideways glance and a little bit of a grin, and he says, oh, about half. The third indicator is motivation. By far, the number one complaint that I hear from CEOs, from managers and executives with whom I work, is that their employees don't seem to be as motivated as they are. Now, some see this as a generational issue, others see it as a lack of character in those folks, and others just see it as the natural order of things. And as it turns out, we do know the top 3 things that motivate workers. Not surprisingly, the top 2 are good wages and job security. Both extrinsic motivators, something that comes from outside. The third thing, interesting work, of course, an intrinsic motivator, comes from inside oneself. Now here's what surprises, again, surprises for us. In the average company, the ratio of extrinsic to intrinsic motivators in the job is 3 to 1. What that means is that 3 times as many people choose wages or job security as the number one reason that they're at that particular job, as opposed to interesting work. But in the best organizations in the world, that ratio is 1 to 1. In other words, in those organizations, the work itself has become just as important a motivator as wages and job security. So, we have very good data that tells us how motivated, engaged, and happy people are on the job.